And we are live.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome all back to our December 21st meeting of the Chiefs Advisory Committee, our fourth meeting together as a group. So before we get started, I just want to welcome everybody and thank everybody again for being flexible and adaptable and joining us here in this virtual format, and anyone who is watching the meeting streaming live this evening as well. So I just want to thank a couple of people as we begin the meeting today for their work in between our last meeting and our gathering today. I want to thank certainly our chair, our newly elected chair and vice chair, for their coordination and communication in between the meetings and getting our agenda ready for tonight's discussion. And I also want to thank on our end, Ms. Rebecca Myers and Ms. Rebecca Metcalf for their work too in coordinating our agenda for this evening. And then without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our chair and vice chair to navigate committee business for the evening.
Good evening to everyone. Chief, I want to also, as the chair of the committee, welcome everybody on to the call tonight. I also want to say thank you to Ajmari Hawk, who's our vice chair, for all of the work that she did leading up to tonight's meeting and being willing to talk with me on multiple occasions during the course of her week during the time that we've been apart. I want to let everybody know that I'm happy to be back on a call with you guys to do the work of the advisory committee. Our charge is, as I see it, to help the police department build bridges and relationships with the diverse communities within Dublin, and in particular our minority communities. And I appreciate the time that each of you has been willing to invest in doing this. Chief, I also want to say thank you to Rebecca Myers and Becky Metcalf, in particular, for helping, being willing to meet with me and discuss the minutes. I think if everyone has had the opportunity to review them, they read pretty well, and I don't think that anyone will have a problem reviewing our minutes from our last meeting at all. So thank you, and I've already made a promise to Becky that I will not occupy as much of her time after this meeting on minutes as I did this past week. All right. So now, Ajmari, I'm gonna ask if there's anything that you want to add, and then if we could just move into attendance, that would be great.
Thank you, Judge. I don't have anything to add, but thank you all for coming together during our multiple meetings that we've had in between the last one, and for your time on this.
Okay, thank you. So, Chief, I don't know that I can see the entire screen, but would it be Rebecca Myers or Becky Metcalf that would call the roll for attendance tonight?
Ms. Metcalf, do you have the list of committee members you were able to call attendance for the evening? If not, I will pull it up and I can do so. I just wanted to check to see if you have it.
Well, I've got everybody's name. It's just a matter of who all is here. I can't see everybody, so.
Well, Judge, if you'd like, I can certainly go down the list of committee members, and we can just, if you are here, just if you don't mind, letting us know, and anyone who is watching at home that you are present. I will go through. Judge, if you'd like me to, I can go through that presently.
That would be great, Chief. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm toggling back and forth between screens here. So Judge Dwayne Maynard.
Present.
Miss Ajmari Hawk.
Present.
I believe he is unable to attend, but Cherie Gadam I believe, sent us an email ahead of time that he was unfortunately called away and is unable to attend tonight. Cameron Justice.
Present.
Yenling Yin.
Present.
Great.
Susan Ortega.
Present.
Great.
Imran Malik.
Present.
Courtney Ingram.
Present.
Isao Shoji.
Present.
And I do believe that Stella Villalba also was unable to attend the meeting tonight. So, Judge, that is the list of all 10 committee members.
Great. Thank you, Chief. According to the agenda that I was following, the next thing would be the review of the amended minutes from our last meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the amended minutes? Okay, that's a yes.
Yes.
All right, very good. Thank you. I would entertain a motion then for adoption of last month's minutes as amended.
Aye. I approve.
Who made the motion?
This is Nimmo. I did. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Imran. Is there a second?
I second.
I second.
I think Ashmari is our second.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion about the amended minutes? They're in good shape, people. If no discussion, all in favor of adopting the amended minutes signify by an, well, for purposes of our record tonight, why don't you just raise your hand? All right. And any objections? All right. So the minutes are adopted. Next on the agenda that I was following would be old business. Is there any old business that we need to address from our last meeting? And on this topic, Rebecca Myers, I'm going to ask if there's anything that we should be looking at that we didn't address from our last meeting.
I'm not aware. I will have a public comment later in the agenda, but I had just sent out some of the information that Tabernick shared with everyone today as a reminder of that's what we'll be reviewing today, but nothing from the last meeting. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca. Anybody else with any old business that we need to address? All right. We're going to move then on into new business. And Chief, before I turn it back over to you, I wanted to give an opportunity to potentially share an update or any information that he might think is important from the other committee, actually the task force on which he also serves for the city of Dublin. So, Esau?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. So we have actually had 2 meetings of the task force since we in this committee last met, just because of the way the calendar worked out. And in those meetings, we ultimately developed 3 subcommittees to divide up some of the topics that the task force would like to discuss. One is schools and education. And there would be some overlap with what we might be discussing today with that subcommittee. The second is communication. And the third is somewhat all-encompassing, but called economics and infrastructure. And that is intended to cover housing, mobility, and workforce. So certainly when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we tend to think about, for example, racial DEI factors first. But we certainly recognize that there are other elements when we talk about diversity, And that is something that the task force is very much interested in addressing. And we are also trying to navigate through the public meeting laws that we're all subject to. So the whole concept of subcommittees took a little bit to come into fruition because any and all of those meetings also have to be covered and I guess in this case broadcast, just like the main task force meeting is. So that is something that we're all still getting used to and trying to navigate. And that may be something that we perhaps need to discuss amongst us or ourselves as well going forward. And there's also a continued discussion on how we navigate certain barriers that exist in the city of Dublin. And that was one of the first conversations that we had as a task force. And I believe we also had somewhat here too. And the idea is, unless we know what the issues are, unless we know what the barriers are that people are experiencing, we may not be able to analyze, discuss, or come up with the solutions to improve upon them. So we do still talk about a potential survey, but yet there is some recognition that we don't want to overcomplicate the matters by spending so much time and effort and energy into having a scientific survey, if you will. So we're trying to strike the right balance of utilizing the network of the task force members, as well as being able to cover as much of the city constituents, as many of the city constituents as are possible. So that would be the update and the report from me on the city manager's task force.
All right. Hey, I would like to say thank you for that, Esau, especially given the fact that you had limited forewarning that we would be asking for an update. But definitely appreciate it and want to ask if any of the community partners have any questions specifically that you'd like to ask in light of the report that Esau just gave. One question I have simply behind that is, you mentioned that there might be some overlap with respect to what the task force is doing and what our Chiefs Advisory Committee is doing. Do you see that as a situation where we should have some dialogue back and forth, more so than just your offering updates and reports on behalf of both the task force and the Chiefs Advisory Committee?
I think the short answer to that question at the moment is a no, Judge. Perhaps depending on how the conversation goes tonight and what it is that we choose to do a deep dive into, that may become a prudent action for us to take. At the moment, I think they are very well aware of what we here in the committee are trying to focus on, and they are not touching on any of the topics. I just mentioned that in my earlier comments. We are talking about school resource officers and community liaison officers. You know, those certainly, especially in the realm of education, may have potential to overlap. At the moment, I don't think there is anything that is concrete for us to be worried about.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hey, so this is Yang. What I hear about the survey you're talking about, I think that's very interesting. Like you mentioned, how can you develop a survey simply not like so have a survey? And I actually tried to reach out to my community regarding SRO, just basically ask them a question. I haven't heard a lot of response yet, but I feel that if you do have that survey, it may be beneficial for us to borrow some ideas.
Definitely, if that task force decides to go in that direction, I think there is something that we might be able to benefit from, or perhaps even piggyback on what they're doing and get some of our questions answered. So I will be sure to have that well, have the two committees connected in that case.
Great. Thank you. All right. So then moving on, this would be the point, Chief, that I would turn the meeting back over to you and the members of the department. And the only commentary prior to the presentation that the department would have to offer tonight is a thank you on behalf of the entire committee for the staff and resources that you have made available to us tonight. And we all want each of the officers who is on the call to recognize that we appreciate both your time and your willingness to be a part of this discussion with us tonight, because we're trying to help the department be better in areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So with that, Chief, I'm turning the meeting back over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Judge. I appreciate you walking us through the front half of the meeting, and thank you to everyone who is here tonight. You can always tell how big the meeting is by how small the icons are on your computer as we start to add people. But I couldn't be more excited to have this group together, and certainly this is a discussion we're going to get into tonight about the School Resource Officer program that we've been having basically since our first meeting. So I'm very eager and anxious and very excited for the officers who are joining us tonight to get to share what they do on a daily basis in our program, in the schools, and in our community. So before we get into that discussion, though, I want to thank Judge Maynard and Ms. Hawk for providing some space for me to give an update during the meetings here and in the future. And so I just wanted to walk through a couple of things and return some responses on some things we've discussed in our first couple of meetings that I felt like we owed you at least an idea of where our progress is continuing on meeting some of the things we've heard from the committee. So the first bullet on partnership between Dublin City Schools and Dublin Police. We do, and we are very fortunate to have two members from Dublin City Schools who are part of our Chiefs Advisory Committee and part of the regular discussions that we have. I also heard in some of the initial meeting discussions that there was a desire, potentially, depending on where our conversation went, to have members from the school administration be part of the discussion, in particular, Dr. Hoadley as part of the discussion moving forward. Having had some discussion with the chair and vice chair in between meetings, we felt like it was prudent today to focus our discussion on the School Resource Officer program with the members of our organization who are involved in that program and who can lend a good understanding of what they do, why they do it, and who they are in those positions. And then if we felt like it was prudent to follow up with members of the school administration to bring them back to a future meeting, we would do so then. I will tell you that I did have a conversation with Dr. Hoadley in between our last meeting to judge his level of time and certainly interest in attending a meeting in the future. He could not be more eager to come and share with us his perspective. Or somebody from the administration come and share their perspective. And he wanted me just to pass along that from the administrative standpoint and from the school board, they are very supportive of the program and partnership that we have, but very also anxious and eager to hear what we bring back from the discussions that we have about the School Resource Officer program with the advisory committee here tonight. So I just wanted to give you an update on that conversation. Again, if we feel like it's necessary, we will schedule that in the future, but wanted to let you know where we stood as far as that issue. And if there's any questions or commentary, I'll just pause for a moment in case there is anything that you'd like to add as members of the committee. So hearing none, and again, as we get towards the back end of the meeting, if you have recommendations or suggestions, we certainly would be interested to hear that as well, so we can take that back to Dr. Hoadley and the rest of the school ad. The second bullet, I wanted to, again, just give credit where credit is due here, and there's a bullet on our agenda for trauma-informed care training. And so that's a discussion that we've had in several meetings previous. Want to give credit again to Susan and to Cam for bringing that conversation to the table for us. We went back and took a look at sort of what we have as foundation for our training as it relates to trauma-informed care, and I had forgotten, although it was brief in our in-service. We have had some initial foundation laid with Centero and Susan. I don't know that I was in the session that you presented in 2018, but we did have a module during our in-service training on trauma-informed care. But I am so grateful for you, members of the committee, bringing it back to the table for us so we can continue to build upon that foundation and continue to see where that training evolves. So one of the things I was excited to tell you is that based on a suggestion that Cameron made and sent some contact information to us on Dr. Bobby Beal, I did reach out and made contact with Dr. Bill, left her a message to just let her know that we had a discussion with the Chiefs Advisory Committee and that we were interested in discussing opportunities for continuing training as it related to trauma-informed care with our organization. As fortune would have it, she was able to reach out to somebody else that was a mutual contact for the organization for us. So Lieutenant Steve Click is retired from the Ohio State Highway Patrol, and he, since retiring, has gone on to work with OMAS, with the Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services. So he is the first responder liaison to Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services and has been for the last, I think, just a little over a year now. He's actually done some training with our organization here in the last several months on our in-service training, and also recently during our supervisory retreat with our supervisors. And so he actually was in a meeting or had a contact with Dr. Beal, and she actually pointed him in our direction, and it was advantageous because we've had some ongoing discussions with him as well. So what I wanted to just return was that we are working on developing or understanding what continuing training would look like for our organization for trauma-informed care training. We actually had a meeting this afternoon with Steve Click and with his director, Kim Kell, who is with the state as well through Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services. Mr. Kell is the coordinator for the trauma-informed care project for the state of Ohio. So certainly has a good background in developing training and is very eager and anxious. Some of the discussion that we had today with the Bureau commanders and I and Mr. Kell and Mr. Click were how we find a way to build training unique for our department and our needs, unique for our community. That involved involved three components really: trauma-informed care, coordinating that with de-escalation training, and then also a consideration for officer wellness and understanding as we have the discussion about trauma and its impact on our ability to understand how sometimes those interactions occur as we are dispatched or find occasion to interact with members of the public who are either in crisis or who are struggling or in need of support from our police department, what that looks like. And then also, frankly, as we have discussions and continue to build upon the foundation of training that we've had so far this year with our members and with our supervisors, how trauma impacts our journey in law enforcement as well as members of this organization and as servants of the public. So what I was really excited about was to have that discussion today about just how we build the right foundation for training, again, that's unique for our members, that's unique for our community and our needs, but couldn't be more appreciative of the members of this committee for bringing that topic to the table and giving us an opportunity to pursue, again, further development and evolution in our training to prepare us, again, to deliver, as we talked in the first meeting, on that mission of protection, service, and public safety in partnership with the community, and to figure out how we do that better in the future as well. So just wanted to, again, just give you an update on where we're moving, and certainly excited to let you guys know and have some input and feedback from your end as well as we develop that programming and training for the members of our agency moving forward. So again, just leave some space for feedback or questions you might have about that bullet point in the agenda.
Yeah, Susan, Cam, I definitely would like to get you guys' feedback or response to that, what the chief has just shared.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, thank you for taking the opportunity to make that connection. And maybe more importantly, I think what gets missed is the impact that trauma may have on you as officers. And so I think taking that next step and analyzing what impact that might have on you all as service members is extremely important. So, and often gets missed. So thank you for that. I think that's a good first step for sure.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo that. And I think just the way you described it, Chief, it's a very comprehensive approach to it, not only wanting to serve well the community, but also your officers and non-sworn civilian employees as well. And I think it's just another example of how this committee is so important and so amazing, because one connection led to another and got you to a place that is fantastic. When you're talking about where Steve Click is connected with and then his supervisor, you're in good hands. And so I think it'll be a really nice conversation to talk about those ongoing trainings so that folks can feel supported throughout and not just on the onboarding. So you're on a good path. I'm excited for you.
Well, thank you both again, and thank you again for recognizing the importance and value of taking care of our members and paying attention to that weight and the gravity of that over the course of a career for somebody in public service as well. So very excited to move forward with that and look forward to, again, returning updates on that progress in the future to the committee. So moving on then to the next bullet point in policy updates, and I kept it sort of broad and nebulous that we keep a place within the agenda for me to sort of bring updates to you on progress in our policy. We have a lot of policy that's written, but we're always looking for an opportunity. I think I've mentioned this before to the committee to analyze and take a look at how our policy is working, what it looks like actually as enactment for our members out in serving the public and protecting the public. And there are a couple of, in particular, pretty important policy updates I just wanted to make you aware of, and we don't need to get into all the details today, but I would like the opportunity, if we get a chance to, and again, we have a heavy agenda today, in particular with the School Resource Officer Program, but for future projection, just make you aware of some things that we've had some movement in policy revision over the last several months. The first, you've had sort of a look at already in Lieutenant Latanzi's memo on our in-service training, and that's our policy on response to resistance, or in some arenas it referred to as use of force. And so we had some amendments and change in our policy this year that we made right before our annual in-service training in September. Again, that memo I'd love to get back to discuss a little more what that looks like and discuss with the committee members opportunity to just get a little better awareness for what our response to resistance policy looks like. And potentially, the lieutenant has had some conversation with our training staff to maybe provide an opportunity to do even some in-person observation of what our training looks like for our scenario-based training for our members that we conduct, just again to prepare our members to be able to not just deliver on the policy, but handle situations in the field as appropriately and as safely as we possibly can. And the second policy I wanted to give an update on because I feel like it's topical and certainly something that's very important to us is our officer-involved critical incident policy. Formerly, our policy was called our officer-involved shooting or deadly force policy. So that change, we've been working on an amendment to policy over the last several months. Lieutenant Tabernick has led that discussion internally for our development of that policy. And it's certainly one of those policies that for a critical incident, we hope to have good policy, good understanding, and a good foundation, and hope to never have to apply that policy ever. That we are following up in the aftermath of a critical incident is certainly something that we hope we never become proficient in, but certainly something we have to absolutely be prepared for. That being said, we want, as we make an amendment to this policy for our members internally, to have a comfort level and understanding of exactly what's going to happen in the aftermath of a critical incident. We also want the members of the public completely aware of and understanding of what our agency will do in the aftermath of a critical incident. So we feel like that is an opportunity, again, as a topic of discussion with the advisory committee. We would love to bring back when we finalize that policy and present that to you, and then get any sort of feedback. Again, no policy that we have in place or that we put in place in the future is ever exactly as it's going to be forever. So we're always looking to figure out how we update, tweak, or improve a policy, and we look forward to, again, presenting that to you in the future and receiving any feedback you may have or considerations that we may need to have as we move forward. So just want to give you an update on those two policies. And then the last bullet that the chair and vice chair asked me just to cover here, just as a sort of floating awareness for responsibility for the committee moving forward, is on reporting to City Council on the community, the Chiefs Advisory Committee progress. So if I am just going to go back momentarily to the resolution, and we do have an obligation as a committee to report, and I think the term that we used in the resolution is semi-annual updates as to its progress, findings, recommendations, and associated actions of the advisory committee. So I just wanted to give you an update. We have not decided when that will occur yet. My intention is to have further discussion with the city manager so that we can coordinate those presentations, if at all possible, on the occasions where the community task force is also giving update to council. For your awareness, Ms. Myers did put together a memo for City Council just as an awareness of our first 3 meetings as a recap. We can certainly send that to you as well as follow-up to this meeting, but it was just an overview of the first 3 meetings, the topics we had discussed, and the committee finalizing the discussions on the election of chair and vice chair. So it was a very brief memo just to give them an awareness. What that memo and report looks like in the future really is up to us as a committee. But I just wanted to let you know my intention was to, again, continue to have discussion with the city manager about when's the most appropriate time and advantageous time for us to take back and return our progress together as a committee, and also if we can lean on Mr. Shoji as well to kind of maybe advise when the right time might be for us, especially if there is some crossover between the community task force and the advisory committee on topics, to find the right time to report on both. So that is my update for the committee, but I'll pause here for any questions, feedback, recommendations, or observations from the members of the committee.
Great. Thanks for the update, first of all, Chief. Anybody have any specific questions that they want to ask?
I don't have any question, rather a comment, Chief. I really welcome the comment that you mentioned. As we know, change is only constant. As we go, policy or process or practice will be changed. So thank you for keeping us in the loop.
Absolutely, and thank you for your openness to again helping us as we navigate our growth and development as an organization.
Thanks to the lieutenants too for working on the policy updates. I think you know, from the vantage point of our committee, we want to make sure that the policies reflect the intentionality of addressing issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion at all times. And to the extent that we can continue to be a reminder and or a resource, committee members, let's continue to do that on behalf of the department and our communities.
Thank you, Judge. I appreciate that. And, again, certainly appreciate and welcome any feedback you guys have in the future as we continue to discuss policy. And so, Judge, if you're okay with it, I was going to move on to the next bullet point and introduce. Actually, I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Tabernick, who has done a great deal of coordination and logistics in getting all the members that we have of our organization here today to talk about our school resource officer program. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Tabernick.
Sounds great.
Thanks, Chief. I wanted to start with thanking each member of our community education unit that is a part of this. And I will tell you, during this entire time, I had multiple members of multiple SROs come to me eager to be a part of this meeting. So every one of these officers that are here, we're really anxious to be a part of this. And really excited about educating this group as to what they do. So I want to thank them for being here. I want to thank Sergeant Rice. I want to thank Corporal Morris for their leadership, not only of this unit, but just during this during COVID, during this difficult time for all of us. And then all of the SROs, to include Officer Nimmo, Officer Burks, and Officer Evans, for their commitment to just a continued and productive engagement with our community. It happens on a daily basis. I think that you're going to see that. They work in our schools every day, and they have touch points with students and administration and staff every single day. And they're looking to really bridge that gap between our patrol officers and officers outside of the community education unit and those students. And I think you're going to see a lot of that today. And I think you'll hear a lot of that today, a lot of anecdotal accounts. And I'm just really excited to hear some of those and pass that information along. With that, I would like to hand it to Sergeant Rice for a broad, kind of high-level overview of the School Resource Officer program in general, to just give us a little bit more foundation about the program before we get into some of those, anecdotal accounts.
So, thank you, Lieutenant. Thanks, Chief. Thanks to the committee. First, I'd like to start off by just introducing each of the officers that I invited here and that agreed to be here. First, Officer Nimmo. He's been one of our oldest school resource officers. He's been around for a while. He's got a great historical perspective of where we were at before SROs and how far we've come. I've also Officer Evans, who gets into our elementary schools often. She is assigned to one of the middle schools, but she does a lot of work in our elementary schools, and I thought she would be a good overview of both elementary and middle school education components of the school resource officer. And then Officer Paul Burks, who is our Jerome High School officer. Officer Burks has been involved in countless mental health scenarios, situations, even been involved in IEPs involving some students. So I felt he was a good resource regarding that mental health component. And then also Corporal Morris, who is like my right-hand man with the schools and also has spent time as an SRO filling in for these great officers. I understand you do want a history of where the school resource officer program started. So with that, I would like to say that it back
Excuse me.
in the early 90s. Yes.
Exactly who are you, Sergeant Rice?
Oh, I'm sorry. I've met a couple of you. So I am Sergeant Rice. I am in charge of the community education unit. The community education unit does outreach and engagement as well as oversees the school resource officer program. I also run our Citizens Police Academy, which a couple of you have been a part of. I work with Rebecca Myers frequently on pushing out messages on social media. And that's who I am. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay.
Chief is always interested in telling us how long somebody's been with the department and if they've been anywhere else as a law enforcement officer.
So I will let each school resource officer speak to that because they've all been in patrol and have had different functions. Me, myself, I have been in patrol almost my entire career. I've been a supervisor on all 3 shifts, and before coming into the community education unit about 2 years ago. I'm a bike officer. I've been a field training officer. I've ran our Citizens Police Academy even before I was in community education. I guess I wasn't really prepared to talk about myself too much. So with that, let me turn it over to Corporal Morris so he can give a little bit of history about himself.
Hi, I'm Bill Morris. I've met a few of you. I've been on a total about 30 years. I've been with Dublin the last 20. Prior to that, I was with the city of Bexley for quite a while. And while I was there, I was a detective. And then as I came to Dublin, I've worked patrol up until the last year and a half. And I've been in the community education unit for the last year and a half.
Officer Nimmo?
Hi, I'm Officer Brian Nimmo. I've been with Dublin since 1995. I was one of the original school resource officers going into the 1998-99 school year. I served about 5 years as an SRO. I went back to patrol and was a patrol officer on first shift and was a field training officer for 5 years. And then I had the opportunity to go back into the schools, and I'm back at Scioto High School and have been there since I think it was 2008 when I went back in, 2009, 2010 school year, somewhere in there.
Officer Evans?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Evans. I am a school resource officer primarily at Carr Middle School currently. However, I also was hired in at the department in 1995. I started as a dispatcher, actually, for 6 years. So what's known as NREC now. I was a dispatcher for the police and fire and took 911 calls. And actually, 2 years before that, I was a dispatcher for Union County Sheriff's Office. So 2 years at Union County, 6 years in the Dublin radio room, and then I took the test and became an officer here in Dublin. I worked patrol for a few years and then became a school resource officer in the 2004-2005 school year. I started at Sells Middle School, which also included several of our elementary schools, Indian Run, Thomas Elementary, Bailey Elementary, and Wright Elementary. I've been in all 4 of those elementary schools. And then I transitioned over to Carr Middle School about 6 years ago, to which then I took over going to Scottish Corners, Wyandotte Elementary, stayed with Bailey, and then most recently am over at Hopewell Elementary as well. So I've been in quite a few of the elementary schools. We work as a team, so when one of our team members is out, we cover all of the schools. So although we may be assigned to certain schools in particular, we really cover all of them.
Officer Burks?
Okay. Well, let me say, first of all, good evening to everyone.
You're hard to hear. You're hard to hear.
Can you hear me now? Unbelievable. Okay. Can you hear me now? Can everybody hear me now?
Can hear you.
Okay. All right. Well, I am Officer Paul Burks with the Dublin Police Department. Been a police officer for 28 years, 3 of which were in New York City and the Bronx and Queens with NYPD. Then I moved out to Arlington, Texas, and was a police officer out in Arlington, Texas for 5 years before getting here in 2000. I've been a patrol officer here since 2000, became a school resource officer in 2016, where I was at Grizel Middle School along with Eli Penny, Deer Run, and Glacier Ridge Elementary. I just transitioned over to the high school last year due to the retirement of Officer Collier. So right now I'm over at Jerome High School, where I'm the school resource officer there.
I would like to mention too that Officer Nimmo does a lot of our active threat training for our businesses. Officer Evans is in charge of our drug take back, and Officer Burks does a lot of our hidden in plain sight opioid awareness classes. So there is some additional historical stuff in there that they have knowledge on in case you have any questions regarding that. So talking about the history, before the school resource officers were created, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was pretty much an overtime or special duty job. And the schools, along with city council, did a survey to determine, if they should continue into a school resource officer program. There was several reasons for this. We did see an increase in juvenile crime leading up to our school resource officer program. I mean, just for an example, back in 1995, we had about 236 juvenile arrests. We're nowhere near that now. So with feedback from the schools, the staff and the students felt safer having an officer present. And basically the contract between the school resource officers, concerning the school resource officers with the Dublin Police Department as well as Dublin City Schools was created. And regarding what we would do in that role, which you guys have gotten a copy of our current contract, knowing that we're not truant officers, we're not disciplinarians, we handle the law enforcement issues that are brought to our attention by administration. We do get in and teach classes, and probably a majority of the work is just one-on-one. I would say counseling, but it's not really counseling. It's just those conversations and the impact that you have on a student every day that you speak to them, to students. I know you guys wanted an overview of what it looks like a typical day for the school resource officers. So I will let each of them kind of give a brief account of what their typical day is.
Okay, I guess I can go first. Okay, my typical day, when I first get there, I wear many hats. When I'm first getting to school, it's in a more safety-oriented role where just making sure that everyone is getting into the building safely. While I'm in that role, I also transition over to my greeting and friendly hello uh, role, where I'm greeting everyone, making sure that they are feeling good when they're coming into the school. The hello, I'm the hello officer that's saying hello to everyone who's walking into the school. I'm doing that for many reasons. One of which is you never know what that person might have experienced even before coming into school, giving them that friendly vibe so that it encourages them to come back. And also, you might have that person who might have some other ill intentions. And when you do say hello to them in the morning, it kind of changes their outlook on how that day is going so far. And might change them for, say, if they were planning on coming and maybe getting into a fight or doing whatever they might want to do, it might change their mind. But that's what I do. And then from there, make sure that the building is secure once all the kids are inside the school, walking around, checking all doors, checking hallways, also passing by classrooms, making sure that everything is going according to the schedule. Because believe it or not, when the teachers see you, the kids see you when you're walking around the hallways and looking inside the classrooms, it gives them a sense of security to which then they can learn and perform better in school than having to worry about, is there somebody going to come into the school and do me some type of harm? So from there, I'm also meeting with the administrators, finding out what are some of the problems that they might be incurring, as well as letting them know what may have happened with maybe some of the students that earlier on in the week or over the weekend, say if it's a weekend type deal when I'm coming in on Monday. From there, I'm then going to check emails and seeing if I have many emails that come in from parents, from say students that are maybe experiencing some type of problem or even a question. So I speak with them answer each email, and it can come from teachers as well. They might have just questions that I be able to answer. If I can't answer them, I can forward them to somebody who can answer those questions. And again, we have lunch duty where once lunch comes around, I'm in the lunchroom. That's where if anything's going to happen, it's going to happen in the lunchroom. So I'm there in the lunchroom to provide security, provide a safe environment for them to eat lunch, to congregate. They can, talk to each other. Well, in COVID situations, it's kind of different, but they can eat lunch in peace. And after the lunch duties, I then go around, check the hallways, make sure everything is okay, check the doors again, make sure it's okay. And from time to time, I may be even teaching class. Okay, we have DAP classes where, for the high schools, we're teaching 5 different courses to all the students that are in the 10th grade or who may be taking health classes. So in a nutshell, that, and then after school, we might have the basketball games, football games, to which I would be working, or we might even have, say, events such as the Alice Women's Self-Defense or any other things that are scheduled that I would be working. So the days sometimes can be long, but it's also gratifying. And that's just some of my day that I go through.
I just wanted to piggyback on that because I know this came up in one of the other Chiefs Advisory Committee meetings was, do we keep track of the positive interactions that we have with kids? That's pretty hard to keep track of because when the SROs are either, welcoming kids into the school or at lunch, they're available for these kids to come up and have one-on-one personal conversations with them. If they, as Officer Burks mentioned, if they have a question regarding something that maybe even took place outside of the school. The students, because our school resource officer program is so ingrained in Dublin City schools, the students know that they are there for a resource. And they get all kinds of questions, whether it's about traffic laws or, a situation at home or, maybe they were a victim of a theft in another agency. These are all things that the school resource officer can provide guidance to them on.
Sergeant Rice, I could also add further. Whenever I'm talking with the kids, this is every period. Say they're changing every period. They see me out in the hallways, and it's not only just asking about, say, police-related things, but it's just about everyday life. They're like, hey, I'm feeling a little down here. I said, don't worry, pick yourself up. Things will get better. It's just that little encouragement that they need. I look at them as my kids. I joke around when I'm teaching my class. I tell them I have over 1,900 kids. All right, they look at me like, what? I'm like, yeah. So I consider you guys all my kids. I treat you just the same as my kids. I want to make sure that you're successful and you do well. That's just how I treat them. And lo and behold, some do listen to that, and if they're in need of help or just have somebody they need to really turn to, I'm bridging that gap to help them in whichever way I can.
If I may piggyback a little bit on what Paul said, my day in the high school is very much like Paul's. The number one thing is for us to be visible and available to the students. If we're not in a class, we need to be out in the halls. We need to be in that lunchroom before school, during lunch, greeting them as they leave that day. Those interactions are constant. And he also talked about, how he feels that these kids are all his kids. I especially feel that way. My children, both of my children have gone through Dublin City Schools their entire time. My son is a 2019 graduate of Dublin Scioto, so he put up with having his father as his SRO for 4 years. And my daughter is currently a senior at Scioto. So, when I talk to these kids and I say that it really means a lot to me to work in this building, it's true. I don't live outside of the city. Well, I live in Columbus, so I'm not in the city of Dublin, but I am within the school district. So, these kids live around me. These parents live around me, and it's not unusual for me to be mowing my lawn and have somebody stop and ask a question about something at school. So it really, really does matter to us, and the ownership is there.
I also just wanted to mention that, many of our SROs, let me think, actually every single SRO is a parent. Maybe their kids are not in Dublin City schools, but every single SRO is a parent. And whether it's IEP, special needs, sports, or something else related to child development, we do understand that from the parent perspective, as well as from a law enforcement perspective.
Judge Maynard and Chief Pius, this is Imran. Are we allowed to ask questions right now, or do we wait until the presentation is over? Or
Go ahead, Judge.
No,
I would suggest if you have questions, again, this is a venue we were asked to share what from our perspective, and I'm so thankful for the members of our school resource officer program, our community education unit, who are here and available. And while we could project information all evening, and they have a multitude of anecdotal stories they can tell you about their experience, it's probably better when those are connected to the questions you have. So I would suggest if you have questions at any point, that's why we're here tonight, is to have a conversation, not just to have a presentation.
excellent, sounds good. So if you don't mind, Judge, I have a couple of quick questions that if I can ask the SROs real quick.
Okay, go ahead, Imran.
Thank you, I appreciate that. So thank you for sharing this detailed information and your personal experiences with the students. My personal thought process or the question that is coming to mind is that, having a kind of a stationary assignment to a campus, does that really help build the relationship with the students, and also kind of allow you the opportunity to get more intimate and see the personalities getting evolved year after year? And how do you kind of use that experience for future batches of students coming in the same campus, and seeing, hey, I learned from those students in the past year that things were, there was some issue they were having at the family level, and I'm forecasting similar situations in this batch, and things that lesson learned from that previous assignment can be transferred to other campus, other resources as well, like for SROs, and kind of shared that. So you have like a, not a training, but like kind of a platform where experiences are kind of shared between the SROs on different campuses, so everybody can benefit. You don't have to reinvent the wheel for a certain situation that comes across.
Yeah, so first of all, every school resource officer has to be a police officer, and in order to be selected as an SRO, you have to go through a selection process, which I believe you guys already got that information. And once you are selected, you do have to go through training through the Ohio School Resource Officer Association, which covers an overview of school resource officers, planning for school resource officers, the role and kind of what you can encounter, relationships with your administration, safety planning, being an instructor of classes, and counseling issues, which involves drugs, bullying, human trafficking, social media, internet, all of that stuff, as well as Ohio school laws. Because there are some things that are law enforcement related, and there are some student records. So if it's a student record, it's not being shared across the police department. However, if something happens with a student in school and that school resource officer is aware of it, and maybe that school resource officer, for example, it happens in a middle school, the middle school SRO will relay that information and what works with that child regarding communication, interaction with the high school SRO. So that information is shared amongst SROs. And as Officer Evans mentioned, they are actually responsible for all of them. And even though Officer Nimmo is assigned to Scioto, if Officer Nimmo is absent, we try to have the middle school feeder middle school SROs fill in, but it could be any SRO filling in there. And as they work and they're in that rotation for that school, they do get to know the students, they do get to know the staff, they do get to know the administration and understand if there have been past issues. It further develops those relationships and opens up the doors of communication. And if any of the SROs have particular comments on that, I welcome them to provide that feedback.
Yeah, I would just also add that I commend this group for being a pretty close-knit group. So they regularly, Imran, when you were talking about are there experiences at one school or by one SRO that could translate as kind of lessons learned for another SRO or at that school specifically, they regularly talk. They regularly meet with school administration on a monthly basis to talk through a lot of these issues and as an entire group to make sure that they aren't missing anything. And exactly like you said, to see if there's lessons learned that, something from this school can translate to another school. And then also, as the sergeant said, passing some of that along from a middle school, for example, to the high school SRO when a specific grade goes into the high school, and having some continuity with understanding those students.
Excellent. And I have one more follow-up question. Sorry for that. Thank you for explaining that so comprehensively. At what point when, the school kind of transfers the case or like a complaint over to the SROs, and the SROs have a conversation as Officer Evans were talking about, that this is more of a conversational relationship, most of the time. At what point does that conversation becomes like, a point of no return, that, hey, this thing is not going in the right direction, additional resources have to be engaged in this specific scenario? And it can be anything, like it can be a complaint that is made by a certain behavior, it can be a certain drug related or anything. I know that as the officers were mentioning, what is that, the tripwire bandwidth?
So the administration will notify us if it's a criminal violation. So if it's an assault or a drug offense or an alcohol offense, if it's just a discipline issue, the school is handling that. Mm-hmm. They may have a communication with the school resource officer, but we're not necessarily issuing out any discipline. I mean, the school resource officer will have a conversation with kids in the hall, or if the kid approaches the school resource officer. But if it's a discipline issue, that's the school handling it. Okay. They will notify us if it's a crime. Does that clarify what you were asking?
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, all right. Excellent.
Do any of the other SROs have any comment on that?
Well, an example of that would be somebody who comes into the administration and says they're being bullied. Bullying is not really illegal. It's not illegal to not be nice to people. Now, if it borders on more of just, instead of what I call schoolyard bullying, if it's more of menacing and threats to physical safety and threats of violence and things like that, we may become a little more involved. But if somebody's getting bullied, we still want to know about it. So those are those conversations we have with the administrators, so that we can kind of keep an eye on them. We can kind of keep an eye on whether tensions might be building between two students or something like that. So the awareness is important to us. But the vast majority of the times, the things that we deal with are not violations of law and not things that we take any kind of enforcement action to do that. Particularly in my school, where 75 to 80% of my students live in the city of Columbus, but within the Dublin school district boundaries. I have a lot of conversations and make a lot of referrals for them to contact Columbus Police Department, just because of the location.
Thank you.
The other thing I wanted to mention on that is if a student is in crisis or having some sort of mental health crisis, the school resource officer may be brought into that, especially if they have a relationship with them. And Officer Burks can give an example of that where he's been brought in and maybe the counselor didn't feel that an emergency admission was necessary, but Paul Burks, because of that relationship, had to take a law enforcement role in getting that person treatment. So, there are some of those situations where we will respond, because based on what's in the best interest of that student.
Yes, Sergeant. As far as
I have a question. Sorry, can you guys hear me? Okay. So my question is, I guess, is there some sort of evaluation system that SROs have? As far like Sergeant Rice, since you oversee them, do you evaluate them? Do you go in and observe them? How do we know that maybe one officer isn't maybe as effective than another in a building, and maybe they need to go somewhere else? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, that's a really great question. So as part of our policies and procedures, they are evaluated annually, but we also do mid-year evaluations to provide corrective guidance. As part of that, Corporal Morris goes in and meets with the administrators and also has the ability to go in and observe them teach their class to see how they actually present and teach that component. And then also we reach out to the school administrators as well as Chuck Collier, the safety security, and let them know, look, if you have any issues at any time, please reach out to us. That is part of those bi-monthly meetings that we have with the schools. Some of that is addressing those issues, if there are any, and opening up communication. So if an administrator is aware of an issue with a school resource officer, not only can they report it through their chain of command, but they also could reach out to either Corporal Morris or myself, and we can address those issues.
Thank you. And one other question maybe kind of follows up with that. You talked about at the beginning when the SRO program kind of first came to be, was that, kind of put the feelers out, kind of felt how parents felt better about having an officer in the building, the students did. How often do you maybe put those feelers out again and kind of test the waters on the efficacy or just the feelings of the community members or students or staff when it comes to the SROs? Do you do that frequently maybe, or thought about that?
So every year when the contract is renewed, that is part of that evaluation process.
Yeah, I think it's also important to emphasize this is truly a partnership between us and Dublin City Schools. And again, I'd like to thank Sergeant Rice and the SROs for keeping a very open line of communication where it's not just an email, hey, is everything going all right? Or let me know if something's wrong. I mean, they're active in making sure that we're doing our part in this partnership. And we truly appreciate the partnership that we have with the schools. So, I think that definitely needs to be stated, because we are trying to look, we both have the same goal in mind, and we're trying to look for the best interest of the kids at the end of the day, police and the schools.
Sorry, just a quick follow-up question. I might have missed it. I had to take a quick phone call. I apologize for that. Just for clarity, there are no evaluations that are coming from students, right? There's no eval of, from the student perspective.
So I do not send something out to the students. The schools, as part of their evaluation in that, they have that right, but that's not something I personally do.
Okay, thank you.
I guess also then in the partnership, we don't know if there's input that's provided on this subject from the parents' vantage point either. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's a good question as well. There isn't that we know of, but that's definitely, between all three of your questions there, that's definitely something we can look into and have that conversation with the schools about to see if that's something that would be beneficial for the partnership between the students and the parents, giving some kind of input on the school resource officer program. So thanks for bringing that to light.
Also, I'd like to say, generally in normal non-COVID years, as part of that orientation, the school resource officers have the opportunity to interact with the parents there as well. Also on our website, we have the feedback that you can provide on officers, and that includes our school resource officers that parents and students can fill out. So, there is some mechanisms in place for that feedback.
I do have some questions, but I just wanted to follow up on that specifically about feedback from parents and students. Is that I would just caution against general surveys. As a practice, general surveys tend to favor the majority being in Dublin, a white population. And we're here for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So any type of survey questions or anything that does go out, we need to make sure that those questions include the equitableness of what we're trying to achieve. So I would definitely caution against using surveys, just as a general rule for anything, really. And then going back to the history of SROs in Dublin, you had stated that they came about in around 95, 98. Is that correct, or did I hear wrong?
So if I could jump in there. So in the summer of 1996, there was a Dublin Scioto High School student named Eric Tong who was murdered on the east side of Sawmill Road there. What is now Walmart used to be a Kroger store. There was an underage drinking party a couple blocks north of that. He was stabbed in the neck. His friends got him to that Kroger and he passed away there. A student from Scioto at the time was arrested for that crime. There was a lot of bad blood between two groups of people, obviously, where you just had a homicide over the summer. And with that, the schools wanted to have security at Scioto High School during the school day. Obviously, they didn't want Kaufman left out. Jerome didn't exist at the time. So for the first 2 years, would have been the 96, 97 and the 97, 98 year, it was a officer there. I don't know what the financial arrangement was, but it was an overtime position for the officers. It was a rotating officer. It was never the same officer every day. And then going into that 1998-99 school year, the decision was made between the school district and the police department to assign a full-time officer to each one of the high schools. We started with just the high schools and not the middle schools. It was also kind of an extension of our DARE program that we were doing at the time. So we were still in the schools in an educational aspect. But those first couple of years were more security aspect because of the tensions that were there during that 98-99 school year. And then obviously in April of 1999, when Columbine happened, it really took on a lot more of the security aspect.
At what point did the SRO program expand into middle schools and then elementary?
Well, that was, to be honest, I don't remember the exact date, but we kind of reworked our DARE program that we were doing. And so we had a presence in the elementary. The DARE program used to be a 5th grade program. We had another program for DARE in the middle schools and then one in the high schools. So when we kind of reworked away from DARE itself, I believe is when they started to expand into the middle schools, and then the middle schools just became a natural liaison to those elementaries.
And just for clarity, no one is permanently assigned in the elementary schools.
So I guess just to feed off of that, what is what are you trying to achieve in the lower grades, like elementary school and middle school? I understand the high school perspective is different, but I'd like to just know a little bit more about what your goals are for elementary students.
Officer Evans, I know you spend a lot of times in those elementary schools. Can you expand on that?
Sure. So the time that we spend in the elementary level, we are building relationships with those kiddos. It's important for them to see us in a positive interaction and have positive interactions. We don't want, as an example, what we don't want and what frequently happens with us is that maybe we're standing in the office and a parent brings their child in. Maybe they're bringing them back from an appointment, they're picking them up something, and the parent says to the child, "See, I told you, you better do what I tell you or this officer's going to take you away." That is a horrible thing to say to a child because now they're afraid that we're going to take them from their families. So getting into the elementary level and starting to build that relationship and that trust with our kiddos at such a young age, we hope to then build further in as they transition from the elementary level into the middle school. So the elementary schools that we are responsible for, the middle school officers are responsible for, are the feeder schools into our middle schools for the most part. There are some overlapping elementary schools. We get into the elementary schools and do book readings or Q&As. Third grade curriculum, they do a community laws section. So, we get into the classroom there. We talk about community laws with the kids, what they're really all about and what the purpose of those laws are in order to keep them safe, even at such a young age. So again, that goal is just to start that relationship and that trust early. As an example, and again, it's kind of strange right now with the whole COVID thing, being that the middle school kids were put into remote right after Thanksgiving break. Our elementaries students were still in session, in person, or in a remote learning environment. Just since December 1st, I decided that I would, since I wasn't going to be in the middle school, I was going to camp out every day at one of my elementary schools for the whole day. Because typically what our day would look like is a visitation. We would go and visit with our school. We'd walk through the hallway. We'd be very visible. And then we'd check in with the administration and see if there was anything we could help them with. And then we would move on to our other elementary schools. But with our middle school kids not being in session in person, I would spend a whole day at an elementary school. And they're split in two. They have an AM and a PM. So as the kids would come in, I would greet them. This last week, I was even playing music just to kind of hype them up a little bit, get them ready for class. And then after all the kids are in and the doors are secured, I would walk around and I'd pop in. The first couple weeks, I would pop into every single class that was in person and talk with the kids, say hi, check in with the teacher, chat a little bit for both the AM and PM. Then the next day I would go to a different school, same thing. Just to get them more comfortable with seeing a uniformed officer. For me, a female uniformed officer, and try to make that connection. So just in the last few weeks, I was able to get into 19 classes. I was asked into the class to either read a book or, as I said, Q&A, something to where, the kids could kind of relax a little bit and just ask anything that they wanted to know about law enforcement or me personally. So it wasn't all about, the law enforcement part. It was just hanging out and chatting.
Thank you for bringing up COVID, because one of the questions that I've gotten to ask all the officers here is that even though everybody is there's different shifts and then different schools are closed, what do you do when different schools are closed? So that actually answers that question. But do you have is there a plan for how you would continue to make yourself available and visible even if all the schools are closed? Like how does that work into your goals as a unit?
So ultimately, that will be at the discretion of the chief and the lieutenant based on what our staffing looks like, how COVID is impacting the department. where is our community education needed? For instance, we had an increase in thefts. Our high school SROs went out and made contact with all of the car dealerships. So it kind of depends on what is going on in the city and where we are needed. In the spring, when it first happened, everybody transitioned back to patrol on all 3 shifts. They spread out to facilitate and take care of facilitate and help fill in with the department wherever we were needed. So it just kind of depends.
Rashmiri, because I'm a teacher, and so we've been kind of, well, life's crazy teaching right now, but I know for myself, since I'm teaching solely in the remote academy this year for Dublin, we've had a hard time reaching out to some of our students and getting them to get online and do school, right? When you're 12 and you have lots of other distractions, school is not, top priority. So we've used our SRO to make contact with some of those families, go out to homes. I don't know how that really works as far as like coordinating that, but I know that he's been willing to do that, and that's been a great help for us, because there are some families that we've had a really hard time getting in contact with. So just kind of doing like those wellness checks and making sure everything's a-okay, and kind of just making contact with them has been helpful to us as teachers during COVID, at least.
Yeah, thanks for offering that, Courtney. We, just for everyone's awareness, this group did do wellness checks, if you will, check on kids that maybe needed a little extra assistance, or maybe that their teachers weren't getting responses or getting assignments in a timely manner, that type of thing. So this group worked with school administration to identify those students in advance that may need a little bit of extra help, and this group worked to provide that assistance, check in on the kids, and we have had some, just so you know, Ms. Hawk, we've had some discussions, Sergeant Rice and Corporal Morris and I, about what this may look like should it go more fully remote in the second semester. So we're going to remain flexible, but with that same background that Courtney just offered there, we still think it's vitally important. This is still a school resource officer program. They can fill in gaps at the police department because they're good officers, but at the same time, as you've heard from all of them, they find it vitally important to stay in contact with their kids, as they call them.
I would also like to add that of the 19 classes that I got into in the elementary, 7 of them were remote classes. And I know that Officer Cochran, who was in the middle school last year at SELS, he actually did our DAP program remote at the end of the year. He was able to get that in, so the kids in 7th grade were able to still get that curriculum.
Officer Evans, just following up, because we've used that acronym a couple of times, or any of the SROs who want to talk about the program. Can you just explain before the advisory committee what the DAP program entails, what that acronym stands for?
Sure. So as Officer Nimmo said earlier, we used to use the DARE program, which is a wonderful internationally used program. But we were seeing some things going on in Dublin that DARE did not necessarily address. Just some things that we wanted to connect with the kids on. So in coordination and collaboration with our health teachers, we came up with the DAP class, which stands for Dublin Drug Abuse Prevention Program. And we have them in the 10th grade, as the high school officers said, but also every 7th grade student that takes health class gets it as well. Not the exact same program. It's geared more obviously towards the middle school curriculum. And so they get 5 days of education with us, or presentation from us. And we deal with the laws that may currently be affecting them, curfew, that kind of thing. We also talk about drugs, alcohol, tobacco, vaping on one of the other days, social media, good choices, making good decisions, and we touch a little bit on just how to get out of those types of situations and just different options for them should they find themselves in a bad situation that they aren't comfortable in. Oh, and I'm sorry, one more additional thing on that good decision making or I'm sorry, on the social media portion is we also talk about like sex trafficking, grooming, that kind of thing as well. That is one of our topics.
I also would like, Officer Evans, if you would mention how you did your panel this year as part of your DAP program and how you brought in other SROs for that, if you could expand on that.
On the panel? Oh, for day 5? Okay, so during our 5 days that we get with the kids, on the last day, we thought to really be able to open up ourselves up, basically, to see beyond the uniform. We gave the kids the opportunity to just ask us whatever they wanted to know, whether it be, again, personal or law enforcement related. And we brought in the other middle school SROs. So at my school at Carr, I brought in Officer Patrick from Grizel, Officer Rigo from Davis, Rigo Quintanilla, and then Officer Nicholson from Sells Middle School. And our goal in that was showing them it was very relaxed. We were all seated. We were in the library. We were in a very large environment. And each of us represent a different area of experience. Several come from other agencies, so they bring that in. I come from, I've been in Dublin as an officer, but also as a dispatcher and being a mom. So they kind of see you in a little bit different light. All of them are fathers, so we talk about our kids, we talk about our families, and our goal is to kind of get the kids to see beyond the uniform, that we are people and that we are approachable. We made it very lighthearted, but they could ask us anything that they wanted to know. And that's something that we decided to do this year in particular, rather than previous years. In previous years, on our day 5, we did a little scenario role-playing interaction with the officer of all the kids are at an underage drinking party and what it would look like if the police showed up at that party, that kind of thing. And they got to ask questions about that process as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Officer Rice, I have a follow-up question to that. So with the growing diversity in the city of Dublin and, of course, the student population as well, what are some of the cultural competencies and sensitivities that come into play during your interaction with this, with the new shape of the city that is coming about? We definitely have a lot of immigrant students as well, immigrant families as well, where language barrier might be an issue sometimes, to communicate not only with the student but also with the parents. So how the department's training is kind of coming comprehensive into play, and what are the deltas that needs to assistance from maybe this committee or the resources that we can bring into play to help you folks out further.
So I would like to say that the community education unit is the most diverse unit at the police department. We have 2 officers that are fluent in other languages, 2 females, an African American, has a Hispanic. So we are a very diverse unit. In addition to the training that we go through as an officer, as well as the school resource officer training that deals with cultural diversity and dealing with students, bottom line, it's relationships and having that one-on-one communication with those students. Regarding the language barrier, we either use translators or our language line to assist us with that. But, all the training in the world will not help you become empathetic if you don't talk to somebody on a one-on-one level and try and understand where they're coming from and their point of view. And that is something that we look for in the selection of the SRO to ensure that there's a little bit of that basic humanity, being able to communicate with people no matter what their background is.
Makes sense. Thank you.
On the question about training and cultural competency, I know trainings are just like one day or sort of several hours. It's really difficult in my mind to retain everything that you've been trained on that one day and then go and apply it without further contemplating on what you're doing yourself and thinking critically on everything that you learned that day. So I guess my question is, like, how does the department facilitate that ongoing conversation beyond just that single day training?
That's a really good question, because I really think it depends on, each school year, the population of the school or where you're assigned could change, especially with the boundary, the redistricting and the reboundaries that the school did. It always mixes it up. And I think you have to be willing to continually grow not only on the job, but outside of the job, and who you're immersing yourself around outside of the job. Because you have to be open to other experiences and, putting yourself out there. And, that is something that I think our school resource officer and the National School Resource Officer conferences, they try and make things relevant. But you're right, one day isn't going to necessarily make it. You have to, look at what you're given each school year and mold yourself to whatever that is. And if you're weak somewhere, that's where the SRO's relationship with Corporal Morris and myself comes into play, because they can come to us and say, you know what, I have I need to take a Spanish class, or I need this in order to interact better with my students. And that's an ongoing thing.
Sog, I really appreciate you asking that question too, because I think that's at the crux of the discussion that we're having today too. How do we consider what training is, what looks like in the future? And I'll use an example from the earlier part of the discussion, and where the committee has already helped us in sort of considering for ourselves at an organizational level, what is the training we need to pursue and then continue? We talked at the beginning, as I gave an update on our hope for development of trauma-informed care training and building upon the foundation that we were fortunate enough to begin with Centero and Ms. Ortega. And so as we talk about how we continue to grow individually, how we continue to grow as a program, how we continue to grow as an organization, I think I'm really interested to hear what the committee members think is important for us to seek and develop. And for our members who have done a fantastic job, and as Sergeant Rice astutely points out, each year our supervisors are looking for an opportunity during that conversation they have with their members as an evaluation to talk about their career development. Career development isn't just professional development, it's also personal development. As you've heard so much today from our SROs in that anecdotal conversation about their activities and about their intentions, so much of it is about connection. Where we started as a program, where we are as a program today, I couldn't be more proud of the members who have been part of this program, the members who are part of it today, in their continual desire to grow themselves, to grow the program, and to connect as a resource for Dublin City Schools, as a support for Dublin City Schools. The example they offered in sort of changing gears over the summer, they forget how much they had to be flexible and just adapt as everyone else did. But as schools shut down, there was a consideration. We got contacted by Dr. Hoadley for a little bit of help and assistance. And thank you, Ms. Ingram, for pointing out, because frankly, we had sort of forgotten all of the ways we tried to help support when everybody else was sort of in chaos, and so many families are dealing with, what does COVID mean for me in my house and my health? What does COVID mean for me at work? What does that mean for me in childcare? What does that mean for me and my kids as students and in learning? For the SROs to willingly just jump in and say, we know these kids, these are our kids, let us help figure out how we connect them to their teachers, to the counselors, to those resources that are at school that have been disrupted this year, as so many other things had been. that to me speaks to the essence really of intention for our program. It is connectivity, it is support, it is care and protection of our student population while they're in school, frankly, while they're out of school as well. So many of those opportunities for us as an organization and as members of the community education unit really speak to us going, we know the school district extends well beyond the city of Dublin, but their care and interest and investment in connecting to students goes to wherever those students reside and their life 365 days a year. So again, it speaks as an absolute testament to the members we have as this organization, but also thank you for bringing up a consideration for the group as well. What do we want to see as far as training and development for our members, for this program, and for our organization?
Thank you for that comments. That's a great summary on what we talked about. I have two questions. One, I appreciate what the officers are doing during the COVID. They go wherever they needed, but we know that COVID isn't just impacting the student teachers, it's impacting all of you as well. What is the department doing to make sure the officers' mental health well-being is also taken care of or talked about?
Thank you very much for asking that question, especially as part of the discussion today, because it certainly has been heavy for us as well, and for all of our officers, not just in this program. Navigating, once in a lifetime experience dealing with this pandemic has been a heavy weight for all of us to bear, and for all the members who are part of this discussion today of the advisory committee. One of the things that we started talking about early last year, even before we knew COVID was going to be a challenge we were going to have to navigate, was really officer wellness, mental health, wellness for us as an organization, for us as in support of those resources in our community. We had very good intentions, like most agencies did at the beginning of the year, and things sort of got disrupted. We worked closely with Centero. Actually, Susan came and did some training for our supervisors around this time last year as part of our staff retreat to talk about mental health, resources and wellness for the members of our organization. We had a plan to hold a town hall forum to talk about mental health, and in particular suicide awareness and suicide prevention last year. Unfortunately, we couldn't hold that because navigating the pandemic, it was uncertain, just as we're all doing virtual today. How are we going to be able to hold a large event where we bring people together to talk about issues of mental health in our community and talk about suicide awareness and suicide prevention? As we have gotten our feet underneath us throughout the course of this year, we have reached out to resources like Steve Click at the Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services. We've talked to Centero, and Centero has come in and done some training for other members of our staff this year. And we've done some work that I would love in a future meeting as well, that again, the lieutenants and Commander Somerville have been working on officer wellness and employee wellness for all of our members, because it's not just the officers, it's our record staff, it's our communications technicians, our admin staff. We are one family here at this organization, and one of the considerations for us with great intention is how do we take care of each other? How do we put ourselves in position to be at a stable place and a healthy place to be able to go out and handle all the things that, again, frankly, in this line of work, there are things that our officers and our communications technicians deal with that nobody on earth should have to respond to or have to deal with, but they do so willingly, and they do so each and every day, knowing that that's a weight that they bear. One of the analogies that we talked about, and Susan and I talked about this at the beginning of last year, was just considering the weight and gravity of this profession for each of our members. And the analogy that we've sometimes used and talked about is each one of those critical events that an officer goes through, and again, talking about trauma-informed care, and each event that an officer goes to or a communications technician handles, they sort of pick up a stone as a talisman from that event. And there's sort of this imaginary backpack that we all wear that we put that in and carry around with us. And over the course of a career, over a course of a lifetime in this profession, we're the only ones that know we're carrying that weight, that we are bearing that burden, because no one else can really see it. And if we don't acknowledge that out loud, if we don't lean into that and consider how do we do a better job of helping each other unpack that backpack, of taking care of that burden for each other, so that we put ourselves in position that we can take care of each other as an organization, so we can do the best job we possibly can to take care of this community. So we have leaned into the resources that we've connected to, and some of which we've shared here today, but we're certainly open to those other resources that may be out there that we're not aware of yet, to be able to make sure our members are taken care of so they can take care of the community. So thank you for asking that question out loud, so we can, again, I can share with you all that work we have done so far, but also to make an open commitment to the community to know if there are things that you can do to help us. We are certainly looking for everything we can, because we're all in this together. And nothing has shown that more than having to navigate as a community, as a central Ohio area, as a state, as a country, as a globe, a global pandemic, to understand how we are all connected and how we have a responsibility fundamentally to take care of each other as we move forward.
That's great to hear, because as Mrs. Evans, you mentioned on the day 5, you actually share you as a human instead of a uniform officer. And I think that's so important to realize that officers, you're tough, you're powerful, you save lives, you work on criminal, getting the criminals in justice, all that. In the meantime, you are a human being. You, if you show the vulnerability more, I'm hoping that the empathetic certain rest you talked about, you show that to each other. In turn, you're going to be able to show that to the community, to the students. My second question is, I think we touched upon a little bit last time. I think maybe Susan, you asked that question on the training of different type of disabilities. For example, recently I got the opportunity to be able to hear a person who is in a different spectrum of autism. What we know normally, what we see normally is this maybe more severe form of autism, but there's so many different type or where they are, whether they can pick up the social cue or not. So I wonder, for the officers you are interacting with the students, do you have the training, or do you feel you are competent on talking to people with that kind of disability?
Well, I can answer that. Every day I stop in at what's called a spec ed, or a special education part of Jerome High School. And every day, just speaking with them, finding out what they do and what they like to do. Also joking around. I'm a jokester, if you guys don't know already. But I really get one-on-one with them and try to talk to them on any type of level. Now, we have those who aren't able to speak back, but that's okay. I know that they can still understand what I'm saying. So with that, we just have huge conversations, and it's always great when you come in there and you yell their name, or hey, how's it going, or applaud them on accomplishments that they're doing. They might have even questions of me from time to time, which kind of shocks me, some of the questions that they do ask me. But yeah, it's just going in there every day and seeing them. As a matter of fact, we had a little thing for them just at the end of school, because it's kind of tough. You can imagine if it's tough for the young people now, you can imagine the special ed or those with autism or things like that, what they're going through, especially in this COVID time. So we decided to put together a parade and go by each and every house and honk horns. We got police department, fire department, and everything to honk horns, yell their name and everything. And believe me, they some were in tears, some were happy, applauding, but it's just the little things. And they, believe me, they're just like any other student. I mean, they might have autism, have some type of other disability, but still, they are the children all the same. They have the questions just like everybody else, and want to be recognized and loved like everybody else.
Officer Burks makes a great point. I would like to point out that there is a particular day in school resource officer training that deals with students with special needs and IEPs. And that is something that we as an organization, we have had training on through either crisis intervention training or even just dealing with people on the spectrum. So I think there are times when SROs want additional training on those situations. I do know that there have been a couple SROs that said, hey, if there's any training related to mental health issues, I would be interested in that. And the Ohio School Resource Officer Association actually has additional training that I believe both Officer Burks and Evans went through, if not both of them, one of them went through last year. So, anytime that there is training available as part of that career development, if I know that's the route they want to take or that's where they feel they need increased training in, we keep an eye out for that type of training.
Thank you.
Speaking of trainings, oh, go ahead, Judge. Sorry.
Yeah. I want to jump in because I want to remain conscientious of time. We're at a little past 7:15. We are supposed to be meeting until 7:30. There are some additional things that we just need to do to get through our agenda. And so I want to ask a couple questions. The first one is, if Chief, Lieutenant, Sergeant, SROs who are on the line tonight, would it be possible to pick up this conversation and move it forward in January? Because there are so many, the dialogue is good. There are so many issues that we really haven't touched on yet that I think that the committee would like to touch on. And obviously we aren't going to be able to get to all of them tonight. So would it be possible to ask this group, or at least other SROs, if the SROs who are with us tonight can't be back with us at a January meeting so that we can continue the conversation?
Yes, sir, Judge. To answer that question directly, however we need to continue the discussion moving forward, whether that's one meeting or part of a meeting, and then continued additional as questions come up or as we make progress in determining what are the right paths forward for the recommendations the committee might have for the program, or the right resources we might need to bring back to answer any questions that the committee has for the program. We will commit to pulling together the right resources until we feel like we've thoroughly examined the topic in this discussion. And that's one of the great things about having the advisory committee as a standing committee, is we can continue to immerse ourselves in a topic until we feel like we've worked our way through it and have comfort level with how we're going to move forward collectively.
Okay. So thank you for that, Chief. And I hope that everybody with the department is of a like mind to be willing to come back. I did want to pose a question to kind of end this part of our meeting, that I would ask the officers and the administrative staff, as well as you, Chief, to consider. But this is really to the SROs, because this is where we're at right now. I want to ask the question: how did the events of last spring and summer impact your views on your job? And behind that, what issues have you, as an education unit or as SROs, sat down and talked about as it relates to law enforcement in Dublin and its minority communities, And is there some intentionality to make more of an effort within the schools to build relationships with the minority students? I'm not trying to ask you to answer that question right now, but it is perhaps the basis for the starting point of a discussion in January when we come back still focused on this issue.
Judge Maynard, I'd just like to answer that as a supervisor. I would like to say that clearly the events from the spring and early summer shows that we've got a long way to go. You know, even though we have a great relationship with our citizens and our school resource officers have been in place, bottom line, we've got, if any one person feels marginalized, we've got work to do. So that's always on our mind. We're always looking for ways to improve and grow. Lieutenant, correct me if I'm wrong in any of this, but you know, I think the SROs are continually looking for ways to connect and grow and build relationships, you know, with our minority community, people of color, special needs, whatever the situation.
I get the whatever part, Sergeant, but I'm trying to be specific and intentional in the question that I pose. And one of the things, as I've been listening, that I'm not sure of is how much discussion the SROs are having or had amongst themselves on this particular issue. And we talked a lot about COVID and its impact on this school year, but you know, we came out of a troubled spring and summer last year, and there are a lot of issues that, you know, are still out there that deserve, in my opinion, some time and some thought and some further discussion. So I just, like I said, I didn't think that was an issue that we could resolve tonight, but I just wanted to be out there and ask the folks who have participated tonight to give it some thought, so that, you know, maybe we can discuss that more or further in January. Fair enough.
I think it's absolutely fair. Thank you, Judge. I appreciate you asking the question, setting the table for our next discussion too in January.
All right. Well, thank you. Can we look at whatever's left on the agenda? Rebecca, can you help me with this?
Yes, I think next is Lieutenant Tabernick. I'm having a couple difficult or technical difficulties, so if I could just go with the public commentary ahead of time, if that would be okay, I could do that right now.
I would say yes, and I would almost, well, Lieutenant Tabernick, you're not going to be that lengthy with what you have to say, correct?
I will not be, but I will defer to Rebecca here, if that's all right with you, Judge.
Yes, thank you for doing that. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I'm having just some internet problems to make sure I could get this to you all in case something happens. We did receive one public comment from Kathy Harder. She just wanted to introduce herself and her group. She says, hello, I'm inquiring if it would be okay for myself as well as the president of PERC, Parents Encouraging Responsible Choices, to come to your meeting on December 21st. We are a group from Dublin City Schools that is an extension of the PTOs. So I had reached out to Kathy and gave her the information to make sure that she can attend any of our meetings online going forward. And I mentioned to the chair and vice chair that I can also help facilitate any information she has about upcoming meetings to make sure that it's shared with committee members.
Great.
Separately, we had another comment from Peggy Kilty. She says, good evening. First, thank you all to committee members, to Chief Pice and the police officers in attendance to your service to the community. I appreciate the overview of the SRO program in our schools. Earlier in the year, I had the opportunity to voice my concerns regarding my children's perspective of the role of police in our community. Could you please let me know if SROs are reaching out to students who have developed negative views of the police? Have there been any discussions or programs in our school 12 to specifically address this summer of social justice, or plans to do so in the future? And I can send those comments to the committee. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, I think that, again, thank you for what you're doing for the department and on behalf of the committee. But obviously, those issues that are out in the community are on the minds of the committee. And we're certainly going to continue to work at trying to talk about, get answers and talk about potential fixes, I guess, is the best way that I could put it tonight. All right. Thank you, Rebecca. Lieutenant Tabernick.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Judge. So at the last meeting, we had some discussion about SROs, school resource officers, and CLOs, community liaison officers. And Chief and Judge Maynard had a conversation, I believe, last week or 2 weeks ago, just so that we could better understand how to present to this group and answer the questions that you have. And we felt it prudent to split those two, so the SROs and the CLOs, into different committee meetings. And just as a little bit of background, so our SROs, obviously, you've learned a lot about them today. And then our community liaison officers, that's an ancillary assignment, so it's an extra assignment, if you will. That's on top of their regular duties. So we have currently 3 community liaison officers, one of which is on this call with us today, Amber McCloskey. And she is a second shift patrol officer, as she introduced a couple meetings ago. So her additional assignment is as a community liaison officer. Officer Quintanilla, that Officer Evans referenced today, he is the school resource officer at Davis Middle School. And he is also a community liaison officer. So again, his primary assignment is at the school, and then an ancillary or an extra assignment is with the community liaison officer program. The community liaison officer program goes back a few years for us, and we really took the opportunity earlier this year, pre-COVID, as a matter of fact, or right around when things were shut down during COVID, to kind of reevaluate the program, see if we can expand it, so that we're reaching a lot of the different demographics in our city. And, you know, an example of that is obviously diversity, equity, and inclusion are large topics for this group, but we wanted to make sure that we encompassed as many different populations of our diverse community that we could. And I'll give our CLOs some credit here, and Corporal Morris for coordinating this in collaboration with Sergeant Rice. They've worked at the food pantry several times now, which I went and observed that a couple months ago, and that is a fantastic community education opportunity for our community liaison officers to be a part of. I mean, that is what we do as police officers, is we help people, and what better way to help people than in partnering with the food pantry in a time of need and then a time of extra need during COVID. So I was trying to be brief there, Judge. Sorry, I probably wasn't. But the short note about the CLOs, we would like to get that, if you're agreeable to it, to a different meeting in the future, so that we can focus on the community liaison program and separate it from our SROs. And if something doesn't make sense in there, please let me know, Judge.
No, I understand completely. As you mentioned, I did have an opportunity to speak with the chief about this a little earlier. I think also I shared a group. I shared this with Ajmiri, so she's not. I mean, we're communicating, so she is aware of this, and I think that we would all be in agreement that that's a better way to approach it, particularly as we see how much attention we still want to devote to our discussion with the SROs. So thank you for that information, Lieutenant Tabernick. All right, so the next part of the agenda would go to recommendations for additional conversations, but I think we got enough on our plate right now. And I think that we've outlined the fact that there are some policy changes that the chief specifically would like to bring back to the committee for discussion and or review. And since that's part of the minutes for this meeting, let's say that would be an issue or a topic point that we would like to come back to if we have time at our January meeting. So Chief, if you could just have everything teed up in the event that we get through our SRO discussion, so that we could at least begin that discussion on policy, the policy changes and updates that you talked about in this meeting. I think that would be enough for our January meeting. Anybody have any different opinion?
Judge, just a quick question or request maybe. Is
Yes.
it possible, Chief, that the training that the SROs go through, we can maybe sit through part of it, like on the next schedule that's coming up, or is that just kind of restricted to the the SROs and the staff only, or
Attend it ourselves?
Like maybe part of the meeting, like or the training, especially the 5th day when we are talking about the diversity and inclusion and equity and inclusion kind of topics and stuff like that.
Are you talking about training that the SROs deliver or training they receive?
They receive.
Okay, so we sent, I think, as part of the documentation, we sent out an overview. That's what you're referring to as the school resource officer basic training?
Yes, what I meant was like like maybe the in-person part of the classroom part of that. So.
So that training that they receive, either there's training that we would bring somebody in to do for SROs, or there is training that the SROs attend as a basic training before they receive certification as a school resource officer. So I think what we could do is, if there are portions of that training that you would like to have further discussion on, one of the things that the lieutenant and I talked about is we actually are well connected to the OSROA, the Ohio School Resource Officer training program. We have good connectivity to members on that board or executives for that program. We could bring them in to answer questions or to talk about specific modules. I think that sitting through a module might be time intensive, and we could, if you had a particular topic you wanted to immerse yourself in, we could bring or we could try to coordinate with somebody to come and have that conversation. In particular, if diversity, equity, and inclusion was a topic that you wanted to hear, what does the training look like that the SROs receive at a basic level? We can reach out to that resource and see if we can coordinate somebody to come and talk about that training here with the members of the advisory committee. I'd certainly be happy to help coordinate and facilitate that as a future discussion as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it. Thanks.
I have a quick question to throw in too, just to let some folks kind of marinate on this. I think I would be interested to give the SRO team the opportunity to think on and let us know what they need. If there's things that they would like to be able to do in the schools, but there is whatever barrier, just so that we can have discussion around that and either go back to the district and have that conversation, or if it's something this committee can try to help problem solve around, just so that they don't feel inhibited. If they have big dreams for what they want to do as students, we want to know how we can make that happen too.
Great point, Susan. Thank you. All right, guys, we got to talk about a January meeting date. And Ajmiri, do you want to pick this up? And
Sure. I had sent out an email just to our 10 committee members asking for just some availability in the second or third week, just to make sure that we make things easy for Rebecca. I know she has a lot of scheduling to work around because we have to work around city council and school board. So we want to make sure that whatever dates that we have available, we provide that in advance. And I'm hoping that with January, we can look at February and March as well, so that we can just facilitate this and make it easier for everyone.
right, and Ajmiri did get some feedback, but not feedback from everybody. And so if you guys would look back over that email and the responses that we did get, that would be great. Cam, you had mentioned the last time that it was some format was better, you thought, for allowing the committee members to just look at their schedules, look at what was proposed, and then try and get down to a date or two. Or I think last time there were actually 3 dates that were proposed. And that's how we got to the 21st of January. So if we can communicate, or if it was Rebecca, was it Rebecca or Becky that put that out for us?
That's Miss Metcalf, Becky Metcalf.
Okay. So if we could get that again, Chief, we can plug in the responses that we've gotten, and I would say before the end of the year, be able to determine our date for our next meeting in January, which would be probably the third week of the month.
Judges, that's what you would suggest for coordinating schedules. We will, and one of the things I would offer is we can actually project a little further out if you'd like, and go forward and schedule the next couple of meetings if the committee has any interest. That way you can get them on your calendar. And we certainly know that things change quickly, but if we can plug them in advance, maybe for the first few meetings of the next year, we can project some dates out and get feedback, and then coordinate that again on our end with the community task force, with council, with the school board, all of those other things that we need to navigate, knowing that the likelihood of us all being at the same meeting, we've done fantastic in getting as many as we possibly could, but we can project a little further ahead if you would like.
Yes, I think Ajmari had mentioned January, February, and March. So yeah, if we can project out that far, that would be great. I was just trying to concentrate on making sure that we got our January date set, and so whatever's on your calendars, folks, for the third week in January, try and keep it open in the evenings from 5:30 to 7:30. How about that? Okay. Anybody else have a comment on future meeting schedules? Okay. Finally, then, anything for the good of the order, and we can just go down the list of community partners, and then Chief, I'll give you an opportunity to wrap things up from the department's vantage point, and then I'll end by saying happy holidays. How about that? So, Ajmari, you would be first.
Thank you, Judge. I don't have anything else to add.
Super. Thank you. Imran, are you next?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it.
Anything that you want to add for the good of the order? Nothing?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you, Judge. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Cameron.
Nothing to add. Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you. Yanling.
I appreciate the open, transparent conversation. Happy holiday, everyone. See you next year.
Thank you. Susan.
Nothing bad. Thank you.
ISO.
Echo a point that Susan made a little earlier about us wanting to hear from the school resource officers about what they want to do. And I also would like to encourage you to share with us what perhaps you currently struggle with, especially with regards to the relationships with minorities. And we want to hear about it, and we want to work with you to improve whatever the situation may be on the ground. So if you would be open to that idea when we gather next time, I would certainly appreciate hearing from you what you go through every day.
Great. We all agree 100%. Thank you for that. Courtney?
I don't have anything to add. Just happy holidays. Thank you guys for engaging in this conversation. It's important work, but it's necessary at this time. So I just appreciate the SROs joining us and having this conversation. So thanks.
Thank you. Chief, let me, well, go ahead and say what you want to say to close out the meeting.
I just want to thank, again, the SROs who joined us tonight. And I want to thank the members of the committee for bringing this discussion to the table and for continuing the discussion with us as we carry into next year. So thank you all. When we started 2020, we didn't know all the things we were all going to go through individually, collectively, and certainly that this group would be together here as we close 2020. And again, I couldn't be more grateful that we are and that we have this resource for us as a community to continue to navigate a path forward in very important and critical discussions. So I just one point of suggestion I would make on the policy discussion, that can continue to be a floating topic for as long as we need to. What I would suggest we can do is as we enact that policy, because I don't want to hold it because it is very critical policy for us to make sure we have in place should we need to call it to action. And again, in particular for the officer involved critical incident, it's one we hope to never have to. But I would hate to miss an opportunity with the work we've done to get it moving forward and to have it in place should we need to. But we can send that to the members as part of an update or in between now and the next meeting. And as you have an opportunity to review it, if we get to it as part of the discussions of the next few meetings, that's great. If not, we were always open to feedback from the members of the committee as you want to provide that to us as a consideration for our discussions about those policies moving forward. So just wanted to suggest we can send that and continue to keep that as a floating item for as long as we need to. And certainly if you have questions or considerations in the intermediate, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And the last thing I will say certainly is happy holidays to everyone. Certainly stay well and stay healthy and stay safe. Thank you again.
Okay,
Thank
great.
You all have happy holidays too.
Thank you, Chief. I just I want to thank everybody who was on the call today, not only the SROs, but the lieutenants, and Sergeant Rice, certainly. All the community partners, I think it's great work that we're trying to do on behalf of the community, and I hope that the community appreciates it. Thank you, as always, Chief, for being open and accessible and willing to lean in with the committee. I just wish you all peace and joy in these crazy times, and look forward to hope in 2021. With that, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Ashmari. I need a second.
I second.
Thank you. Good night. Happy holidays.
Good night.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks,
Happy
everyone.
holidays.